Thank you all so much for joining us. We're here with our gracious host, Los Alamos ScienceFest, and we're going to take the next hour or so to discuss the future of cybersecurity. We have a great set of panelists here, some of the best in the world. Myself, I'll be moderating this. My name is Augustine Ortiz. I've been a security researcher and pen tester with Attack Research in White Rock, New Mexico. I've been with them for the last 9 years, been pen testing for probably the last 5, and then overall about 20 years of experience between working at LANL and working with Attack Research. So a lot of experience. On our panel today, we have Brian Hnath, who also joins me from Attack Research. He has more than a decade of experience working in both the cybersecurity systems and architecture, and also split time between Attack Research and Los Alamos National Laboratory. His expertise is primarily with a strong business background, and does a lot of our contract negotiations, and has a very strong understanding in the field of what customers want and what's happening in the industry from a business perspective, which is excellent. We're also joined by Neale Pickett. Neale is a solutions architect at LANL and a cybersecurity educator. He worked from 1997 to 2010 as an incident responder at Los Alamos National Laboratory. After developing the field of network archaeology in 2008, he has been called to investigate multiple high-profile events across the U.S. federal government. He also began the Multi-Lab Cyberfire training program as a means to teach others about his techniques, and now leads its execution. So thank you for joining us. We also have Lauren Pearce. Lauren Pearce is a cybersecurity technical staff member at Los Alamos National Laboratory as well. Graduated with a master's degree from Florida State University in 2015. Immediately started at LANL as a member of the Cybersecurity Incident Response Team, or CSIRT, as it's known for short. And she's been there for the last 5 years. She claims, although she's a capable generalist, she specializes in malware analysis and reverse engineering, and teaches malware analysis for the Department of Energy's Cyberfire training series. And she's also regularly mentors students interested in breaking into the field of cybersecurity. So again, thank you all for joining us. This is a great panel to have on here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we're about to have. I'm personally really excited about it. We have, so what I have prepared is I have a set of questions prepared that I'm going to present to all the panelists. Any questions that you might have as the attendees, if it's related to the topic at hand, we have a question and answer section in Zoom, and it's going to be text only. So you can basically send us a question and I'll try to address it and move us into it as we address it. If it's unrelated or you have a question that we don't cover, we are going to have about 20 to 30 minutes at the end of our discussion to go over any user questions that come up if we don't cover them along the way. So feel free to ask your questions and I'll do my best. And you can also direct them at panelists in there, and I'll try to answer those questions, or maybe try to answer them either with text or bring it up to the rest of the panel. All right, so great. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So the first question I have is, what is the future of cybersecurity from your perspective? What are we looking at? This whole ScienceFest is about the future. What is the future? How's it looking going forward? What are the trends look like? Do you think the posture's gotten better? Has it gotten worse? What are some of the general trends you're seeing? Neale, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I think we're going to see that there are many more computers connected to the internet now than there ever have been in the past, and these computers are not managed by professional teams as much. I'm talking about, smart thermostats and your car, things like that. So I feel like there's a growing consensus that we've unleashed these very powerful tools and given people the responsibility to take care of them, and that wasn't necessarily the best decision. So we'll start to see more of like safety mechanisms being put on things, on consumer type devices, and less of the, it's your fault if your computer gets compromised. And then I also think we're at this interesting place where just lying has sort of taken on a new prominence in society because so many more people are connected by the computers that we're seeing. And in the past, we've seen things like phishing attacks and things where by using lying and like integrating social techniques with computing techniques, they're able to get footholds and stuff. And I think that I expect, and I don't know how it's going to happen, that we're going to see some sort of confluence of lying and all of these computers that everybody has to exploit people in a way that nobody could even dream of right now. But I think that's going to be one of the big problems that we're going to have to deal with as a group of professionals, is dealing with the social aspects that we've really never had to look at before in the past.
Great, thank you. Lauren, anything to add? I think you might be muted.
Yeah, so we are in this place where a lot of times, and for the past like 10 years, the human lets somebody into the network, and we metaphorically whack them with a stick and say, bad human, and blame the human a lot. And I think that our networks need to get to the place where they're human proof, which is going to be obviously difficult. But the newer security products, there's a lot of focus on moving to instantaneous detection and remediation, automatic detection and remediation, and to try to put up more walls between the human being able to compromise the whole network versus the human being able to compromise their little piece of the network. And so I think that we are moving towards more advanced security products and less individual responsibility, less blaming of the end user and more blaming of the system that lets them lead to such a huge, lets one individual cause such a huge event.
Great, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, so from my perspective, the trend that I've been seeing is that, obviously we focus on a lot of security testing, right? And there's been a trend towards everything being audit driven. I think companies are not willing to spend a lot of money towards security unless it's being pushed by audits. And so things like PCI are going to continue to be more prevalent. Yeah.
Okay, great. Would you, so Brian, would you say, do you see this as like a good thing or a bad thing? Are the audits improving things, or do you think they're making it worse? What's your feeling on that?
I think that they're helping. It's forcing companies to spend money on it.
Right. And then Neale, you talked about, lying a little bit and kind of more the social aspect. Do you think that's, we were talking about things we haven't really seen yet, but I think are going to start seeing. Is it, do you feel that we're at a point to where that's the next step, or do you feel like, is that going to make things worse than it has been in the past? Or do you think, hey, well, this is good that we're at this point, that's the next avenue?
Well, it's always an arms race, right? I think probably overall for humanity, this is a positive step, because as Lauren and I both have said, everybody's starting to understand that the people that have the ability to fix things should be the ones that are on the hook to do it. And so, we're starting to see, I don't want to get too far off topic here, but there's a lot of focus on how social media platforms, for instance, are affecting society, right? And that's not yet a cybersecurity issue, but it could easily become one. And we're going to see the people who have the deepest pockets, and like governments getting involved in cybersecurity issues. And old guys like me are going to be kind of upset that things are changing the way that they are. But overall, the people with the ability to make the changes and the interest in doing so are going to be the ones that are being held to the fire on it, instead of what it's been before, where I blame my grandmother for not installing her Windows updates.
Yeah, so with COVID-19 now, we have a lot more people working from home, and people kind of trying to administer themselves, where the IT reach isn't there. what's your feeling on how that's going to be affecting security with boundaries being extended and, less access to those computers, maybe more people working on home computers to do actual work, more reliance on VPN. I mean, that sounds to me like it'd be pretty dangerous. Do you agree?
Yeah. I'm going to punt on this one to Lauren because she's actively having to deal with this specific issue, and
Perfect.
can probably speak much better to it.
It's terrifying. I can help protect you when you're on my network, and we can do a pretty good job of that. But when you are accessing my network resources from your home network without even being VPN'd, dependent on the resource, it is a whole new world. And I've kind of felt like I had to relearn my job, relearn to a new network, almost a completely different network with completely different holes and problems and things like that over these past few months. And we're doing it, but it is absolutely different and it is scary. It's a pivot that a lot of companies are having to do, and they're having to do it very quickly, which means that there are holes, and we're working to fill those holes as fast as we can. But this is definitely a vulnerable time for a lot of companies, I think.
Yeah. How are you handling like your SOC teams and that kind of stuff? Because now they're remote, right? Like SOC teams generally are, bullpens, right? They tend to work in a single environment and they're watching all the monitors. How without obviously be careful, but how is that working with now everybody working from home? How are you able to mitigate that?
Yeah, so we're interesting in that our tier 2 response, our network operations team, does live in a bullpen type situation and are used to being able to shout over walls to each other and things like that. But our top tier, our CSERT team, is used to working in offices, and we've become very good at communication, even working in offices. So it's not that much different. Obviously, I can't run down the hall and start screaming at somebody, but we're doing a lot of open chat lines. So we'll just keep a WebEx session up for the duration of an incident. And so anyone and everyone is expected to be listening in and pop in and can shout things. And we're using our chat servers and individual rooms and things like that to communicate. So we're doing very well on the communication side. All of our monitoring tools we can monitor remotely, and we're still chugging along.
Great. So, along these lines, we're seeing a lot of companies stand stuff up quickly, like you said, all of a sudden doing all this VPN work. I mean, Brian, how have you seen companies kind of responding, or how's the industry kind of looking? Are we seeing an uptick in security? Are we seeing a downtick in security during these times with financial issues and everything else? How is that kind of playing into all of this?
Yeah, so a lot of our customers have had to furlough and lay off people. Security is usually pretty protected, but there are a lot of reductions in force going on. So I would say that from our perspective, business has been up. There's more hackers and hacktivists active in the community. People who don't have work to go to, they look for other activities. And so that's indirectly resulted in more work for us. I think companies are in a tough spot right now. But yeah.
Cool. So, we've talked about some of the boundaries and things like that. Let's kind of shift kind of away from, COVID-19 a little bit. And, what are some of the primary like attack targets or threats that you see today? And we talked about lying and some of the other stuff. What are some of the other things that you're worried about right now and as like certain attack vectors or certain like defenses that you see definitely need to be improved upon? Neale, you want to start this one off?
No. I can ramble on. I honestly, so in terms of like things that are happening today, I feel like Lauren's probably a lot better at speaking to that because she's dealing with it. I'm just teaching people how to think.
Great. Go ahead, Lauren.
All right. As far as the attack, the targets, I think the human right now is very often the initial target. That doesn't mean it's the ultimate target, but it's the vector through which you go to get to your ultimate target. And so we're seeing a ton of phishing. So fake emails being sent, claiming to be from your bank or from whatever, just looking to get that click that gives them an in. From there, where they go is dependent on what they're interested in. There has been, in the last few weeks, an uptick in ransomware, specifically targeting businesses, not necessarily individuals. And so that's certainly something to talk about. Businesses will often have, at least medium-sized ones, will often have a backup system, but often that backup system is connected to their network and does them no good. So ransomware is certainly one thing to talk about. The cloud is another thing to talk about. The cloud is kind of terrifying. You're passing liability to another company, you're passing risk to another company, which is appealing for a lot of managers, but it's terrifying for incident responders who want control over everything. And some of the newer vulnerabilities show that your cloud might not be as much your cloud as you think it is, which is equally terrifying. Let's see, what else do we have? We have our banking Trojans that have never gone away. So just sit on an individual's computer and scrape credentials and information to clear out bank accounts. And that's most of what I see is ransomware, something trying to get into confidential information, or those just commercial commodity banking Trojans. Even a national lab has to deal with that. So.
Great.
So
and, sorry,
can I toss one in?
Go ahead.
So Lauren brought up the cloud, and like Lionel has a very good incident response team, but I think a lot of places don't really have that level of expertise on staff. And I wonder how she feels about the notion that like maybe by moving stuff to the cloud, you're actually improving your security posture because you're able to outsource sort of keeping track of the hard drives not getting all encrypted at once and things like that to a team that can actually handle that level of stuff.
I think it depends on what your existing security posture is. So I think for a lot of places with a weaker security posture, handing that to Amazon, for instance, to deal with might strengthen them. But if you have a team with a strong security posture and maybe you don't have logging set up on Amazon, maybe Amazon doesn't get you the logs for 30 minutes, which is an eternity in incident response. Maybe you start to sink in your security posture because you start to lose visibility as you move to the cloud, and you start to pass the buck on that security. And if you are already here and who you just passed the buck to is here, then you've actually lost something. So I think it very much depends on the posture contracting out. Great.
And then, we've talked about cloud and other stuff. What about the web? Now that almost so many products are moving to the web, everything's on the web, and a lot of it's like custom written, custom built stuff. Are you seeing like an uptick in vulnerability there, or maybe a drop in vulnerability there? Like, has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse?
We still see a lot of exploit kit attempts. The nice thing about a lot of the web attacks, as far as like the script kiddie exploit kit stuff, is if you keep your browsers patched, you keep your operating systems patched, a lot of that gets taken care of. So there is some janky code out there, and I am worried as anybody starts to write programs that you install on your phone, for instance, that you install on your computer, and you start to give privilege to that crappy code, what doors you're opening for an attacker. But through the browser is the door, and use a reputable browser and keep it patched, and you take care of a lot of that.
Great.
And I'll throw in on that, like we've been saying before, we're seeing a lot more where the people who distribute the browser are recognizing that it shouldn't be the end user's responsibility to keep the browser up to date. So we're seeing a lot of like self-update mechanisms and things like that, which is much, much better than when I was doing incident response and you had to call 300 people and tell them to update their computers.
Yeah, I agree. That's been definitely one big change for the better.
I think that Lauren mentioned mobile, and mobile is another avenue that a lot of hackers are looking at, and nation states as well, like with the issues with TikTok and collecting human intelligence.
Yeah, correct. That was another big one. So are there any new technologies that we're kind of seeing that maybe might help with this? You know, like Brian, what companies have you seen? Like what have you seen them deploy? You know, every time I walk through the airport, there's companies providing, you know, hey, this will solve all your problems. This or that will solve all your problems. What kind of stuff are you seeing, and what's been the effectiveness you think overall with some of these products?
Yeah, there's been a lot of new tools introduced. A lot of new host-based antivirus out there. We talked a little bit about or touched on the next generation firewalls. A lot of these antiviruses work through kind of obscurity. They are very difficult for researchers to get a hold of. So it's tough for us to do testing against them. I think the automated tools are getting better, like Lauren was talking about. Having to protect from the user, the human, is important. But at the same time, you still have to have that defensive team, right? You still have to have people reading logs, making sure that all the tools are set up correctly. There was an engagement that we did very recently where we were able to get access to security tools used by a company. So ensuring that they're protected well, I think is going to be super important for companies moving forward.
Great. And, you know, Lauren, you mentioned you had some knowledge in like machine learning and artificial intelligence and some of these, you know, buzzwords that are been circulating around. What's your feeling on some of those products, or how is that changing the industry, or do you think will change the industry going forward?
So I love them. So we have machine learning in most security tools now. It's in our firewall. It's in your host-based antivirus. It's in your malware analysis sandbox. It's all over the place, and it's great. The problem with it is that it doesn't catch everything. But it's really good at catching the commodity, normal, run-of-the-mill stuff that can really, I use the term DOS, it can really just take up the time of your incident response team. And it's commodity crap that you really don't want to have to spend time on, but you do, because somebody's got to clean up the banking Trojan, right? And these machine learning tools are the firewalls, the antivirus, the malware analysis sandboxes, the scanning of all attachments inbound, whatever. It's great at catching that low-level stuff. And that frees up the human, the incident response team, the analysts, the reverse engineers, those people to work on the more advanced attacks that are not getting caught by the machine learning. Because machine learning, at least as it's being used primarily for security, it knows what it's seen. It learns from what it has seen. And these advanced attacks are doing things that haven't been seen unless they're getting undetected often by the machine learning solutions. But if you free up your analyst time from that commodity crap, then you get to spend some time on that advanced stuff. And that's where your expertise should be. So I think it's been great for the field.
Yeah, I agree. It's raised the bar. You know, it's not that they're impenetrable. You know, they can still be defeated or learn the wrong thing or whatever, but it has raised the bar to where, yeah, you're right, gets rid of all the commodity stuff. That's a good point. All right, so now that I think maybe we've scared everybody, it sounds like the Wild West out there. You know, what are some of the things that you know, the average user, right, who I assume is a big part of our audience, can do to protect themselves? You know, going forward and in this time? You know, we talked about some of the lying, some other stuff, you know. Neale, what do you think are some things that, like, you know, normal users or maybe even small companies can do to protect themselves?
Yeah, well, there's some real standard advice that still needs to get out there and adopted by everybody. Use a password manager. Don't remember your passwords, because a password that you can remember is a password that can be hacked. If possible, you should set up multi-factor authentication. So a lot of places have something where they'll text a number to your phone. That's a type of multi-factor authentication. There are better types where you can use a physical device that you plug in when they ask you to do it. That can help a lot. And then another thing is that as people start bringing more and more devices into their homes, like I think I have almost 30 in my house right now, and we have a pretty small house. Every time you buy something that connects to the network, think to yourself, if the company that you're buying it from is actually somebody that you would trust to develop software, right? So like some cheap Chinese smart pumpkin that you put on your porch for Halloween and tells you when trick-or-treaters come up probably isn't ever going to get a software update. And the self-updating software that we've been talking about is the thing that keeps you current and keeps you from being part of a big problem. And as we're seeing more and more, these attacks are going after just all these little devices connected all over the internet. So it's really important to think like, you know, is it more likely that that this $3 part on Amazon is going to get security updates for the next year, or maybe the $15 one from TP-Link is going to do a little bit better there.
And you can say, what do I care if my little trick-or-treat alarm gets hacked? But what you have to understand is that they're getting hacked and used against other entities. So they're being turned into weapons, and you don't want your little trick-or-treat camera that you're responsible for to be used to take down someone else. So even if you don't really care about the security of your trick-or-treat camera, that's why you should.
Right. Yeah, and we covered kind of some of the stuff that, like, a lot of stuff is patched. So, you know, stay patched, I think, is also still a good thing. You know, don't turn those off. Like, go ahead and stay updated as best you can. You know, as far as users, so I want to cover a little bit about like the value of privacy. And, you know, we talked about lying and you know, being social engineered. And now we're seeing things like, you know, there's legislation going into place about backdoors and companies having backdoors in products. We kind of talked about that as well. You know, does that $3 Chinese pumpkin have some type of backdoor? Do you want to talk about the security or awareness to that, or the value of privacy, or having backdoors in general? You know, especially when we start seeing litigation that now the government is wanting to introduce backdoors into encryption and things like that. What are your thoughts on that? Let's start with Lauren, since you just spoke.
I think put a value on your privacy. And that might mean that when your device no longer receives support, you buy a new device so you can keep your stuff patched. That might mean paying for an app that you could get free if you allowed ads. That might mean spending a couple $100s more on your home security system to get one from a company that you trust instead of one from a company and country that you don't. And put value on your privacy. As far as government backdoors, it's an unfortunate truth that a backdoor cannot be created that is accessible only to people that we trust. And so that's where I get hung up on that. I don't want to speak too much to that, but the idea of backdoors and encryption, you can't put a backdoor in a product without weakening the whole product.
Great. Brian, anything to add to that?
I think Lauren did a great job. The only point that I was going to make was, you know, try and understand who wants your data. You know, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. And that's kind of like a mantra that has been going around the industry for a while now.
Great. Neale, anything to add to that? Thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, so we're all sort of edging away from giving direct opinions on this because this is ultimately a political question. But I think the fact that it's become a political question sort of speaks to its elevation of importance in society, right? So we kind of, like, the nerds had our chance to sort of hammer this out, and this is where we are now, and it's kind of out of our hands now, right? These discussions are going to be happening at a societal level and a political level. And honestly, the intricacies of all of this is just too complex for most people to navigate, and they shouldn't have to. But if you care about these things, the time for making technical decisions is sort of like the window's closing on that. And you need to get involved at a political level to sort of guide that moving forward. How is that for not taking a stance?
I will say encryption often gets in the way of me doing my job. I want to see the network packets going in and out, and you encrypt them, then you take away my ability to do that. There's some wiggle room there. But often I spend days cursing encryption, but that doesn't mean that I think we should just get rid of it, because it certainly is important and has its place and has done more good than bad. So we're all kind of hedging, but it's a very hedgy question.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. All right, cool. So let's pull off of that. So, you know, we have a lot of attendees with us. You know, what are some ways to get into cybersecurity now? You know, how has the industry changed a little bit as far as getting into it? You know, some of us older guys, we kind of started, you know, learning on our own or trying to learn off forums, or, you know, what somebody was boasting about that they did. You know, how has that kind of changed over the last few years, and what's going forward? If somebody wants to get into this field, how can they go about it? And since Neale, you talked about doing more, since you do more education, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what would you suggest to somebody getting into this field?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, like when I was getting into this, it was just through hobbies. And that was really the state of computing back in the 80s when I was started getting my feet wet. If people are interested in this, there are online courses that you can take that are specifically targeted for cybersecurity. There are whole college programs that you can get a cybersecurity degree with that are very good. Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, I think that the window's closed on being able to just dabble around with things as a hobbyist and get into and really make headway in the field, unless you're so dedicated that you're able to do something that rises above the thousands of other people now doing it. But yeah, I would suggest going through the sort of structured approach that exists now.
Yeah. Brian, we got a question about security certifications, which we know there's a lot out there now, and you just finished one. So what's your thoughts on some of the certs circulating out there right now?
Yeah, so there's obviously a ton out there. The certs are becoming, I think, a baseline to get into the industry. You know, it's you know, there are so many applicants for jobs these days that it's kind of a minimum requirement. So I just finished up my CISSP. There's, you know, it's an okay degree. There are a lot of people equivalent equating it to like master's level style course material, and it's good. OSCP is good as well. A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, they're all good tools. I think it's important to focus on where you want to end up in the industry, and then pick a cert that dovetails into that nicely.
Speaking
Great.
for
Go ahead.
Speaking for my experience, if you have a degree in CS, we don't typically look at certs. And if you have certs, we're really going to look at how you think, because many people can go to a 1-week boot camp and cram enough knowledge into their brains to take the test and get a cert. But what we really need is your ability to apply that knowledge and think through it and put all the pieces together into one comprehensive picture. I'm not going to say don't get a cert, but don't let the cert be the end of your education. As far as getting into the field, I wanted to throw some comments on that. I am a big fan of a solid computer science degree as a foundation. And when I say that, there's some degree programs that teach you how to write code, and there are some degree programs that teach you how computers work. And you really need to find one that teaches you how computers work and how to write code, to be honest. But I love the programs, and I've interviewed a lot of people for student positions and positions on our team. I really love the programs that teach C, that actually make you touch memory, that make you clean up after yourself, that teach you what's going on inside of the computer instead of just how to write a program for it, because that's where a lot of the security problems occur, is at that very low level. The buffer overflows, the classic ones are all occurring very, very low level. And if all you know is how to write Python, you don't have the knowledge to understand how these security vulnerabilities arise. And so I encourage people to find a solid computer science program and work from there. There are some very good cybersecurity programs, and there are some very bad cybersecurity programs. There are cybersecurity programs that will hardly let you touch code, will hardly have you program at all. And I do think if you're going to study cybersecurity, you should understand how computers work. So I typically recommend solid computer science foundation, and then build upon that on your own with security stuff on top. And that's how I got here.
Great. Yeah, I agree. I think the certs can only get you so far. Like they might show you how to think, which can be good, but without a solid computer science background, it can be kind of difficult. And I think a university program is, I agree with Lauren that a university program is good because it kind of sets that foundation and covers the foundation without any gaps. While at one time, you know, some of us older guys, you could just learn by studying what was available around. But what we've seen is there'll be kind of some holes in their knowledge. They might be really good in one area, but maybe weaker in others. So I think having that foundation is still a good thing to have. And there's a lot of great programs now. You know, even in our own state, New Mexico Tech, I've been pretty impressed with their program and some of the students they've been putting out. So I think there's a lot of great ways to get into that. All right, so I think that about wraps us up for my set of questions right now. And kind of get into some user questions that we have since we have a few. One of them that came up early on is a user requested for us to talk about Spectre a little bit. Spectre being a vulnerability that was in some microprocessors, and you know how that was dealt with. Anybody want to raise their hand to take on that one and talk about Spectre?
Talk about it.
Okay, great.
From a very high level, it's cool. It's this new. So in the past, the attacks that we launched were sort of at the software level. So the thing running on your computer, you'd be running some other code that the bad person wrote, and then it would take over, right? But what's happening with Spectre is it's using the fundamental guts of the computer itself to spy on other things happening on the computer, and it's crazy because we're getting down to the level of almost like quantum effects between different parts of the chip on the computer interacting with each other. And you can detect that in the software. So what Spectre's doing is it's making it so that, you know, when your computer's multitasking, which every computer does now, including your phone, something that the operating system might have squirreled away and said, okay, you can only do these things and you can't see what else is happening here. Well, they can use Spectre to sort of leverage these physical effects happening on the computer to see what else is happening in other parts that they're not supposed to be able to get into. And the mitigation for that, and this whole class of attacks so far has ultimately resulted in slowing everything down. So a lot of these attacks take advantage of optimization techniques that have been put in the hardware to make things go faster. And so they have to slow it down to sort of mitigate from this. So ultimately it's kind of forcing things sort of to take a couple of steps back here in terms of speed. But I think we're going to see more of these types of attacks that bridge maybe down to like the physics level that people like me had never even thought of before. And that's really exciting, not from a benefit of society standpoint, but just from a research standpoint.
Yeah, I think it's been great to see, you know, these type of attacks at this level, right? And I think one change to the industry is that now that it's become more accepted to be involved in the industry and not be immediately labeled as a bad guy or have to be part of the, you know, hacker culture, quote unquote, is that you're getting a lot of people with extremely talented, very, very smart people now involved and with funding from Google and stuff to find some of these very unique issues, which I think is really exciting. But also it's one of those ones that's like, darn, that's a hard one to fix.
Yeah, a lot of what we saw was it's a complicated issue, and it's tough for businesses to understand it and how it's going to impact them, and how to manage the risk around it. What can they do? You know, especially if it's on you know, software that they can't easily update or patch or anything like that. You know, what guardrails can you put around it to keep yourself safe?
right, exactly. Okay, so another question we have is, how effective are common firewalls in protecting hacking and malware that come up with current computers like HP, Dell, or Apple? You know, how effective are those? Personally, I think they're pretty effective if they're configured correctly without too many things open. Lauren, what's your thoughts on that, since I saw you unmute?
Yeah, if you leave Windows Defender fully fanged, so don't turn things off, it is very good. It is a very good antivirus in and of itself, but you can start turning things off and make it extremely weak very quickly. And people find it annoying sometimes as it does its extra scans and stuff, and start turning pieces off, and then it's no longer all that good. The Windows firewall is also pretty good. You can tweak its settings a little bit to lock some things down, but its default settings aren't horrible. It's very configurable. It's very customizable if you start playing with it. So as far as a consumer firewall goes, I think Windows Firewall is just fine. In the Mac world, first off, Macs do get malware. I wipe so many Macs. It is absurd. So please don't feel immune. As far as Mac antivirus goes, I would install something because Mac does not want you to believe that Macs get malware, so they don't make the antivirus thing like a big deal, because that would be acknowledging that they have a problem. And so I like Malwarebytes on that side of the world. It's one of the better tools for OS X. And I am not sure about firewall in the Mac world, to be honest with you. But as far as antivirus, Bytes my favorite.
Can I ask Lauren another question?
Hit me.
Yeah.
So I've been recommending to people, if they say like, what kind of new computer should I get for my mom? For instance, I've been almost 100% of the time saying, get a Chromebook, because it locks everything down. It updates itself for security patches. And I just feel like overall, there's just a lot less. It's more like it's a consumer end tool and not a professional tool.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I like it. I like iPads too. The problem with Macs is if you stick to the App Store, you're usually pretty okay, but Mac doesn't make you stick to the Mac App Store. You can turn that off and start downloading crap from the internet, and people do. Apple, I have not seen iPad. It might be there, but most people leave the App Store as the only place to get things when they play with an iPad. I haven't looked at Chromebook very much. I'm a big believer in the more attack surface you have, the more attention you'll get. So the Chromebook thing hasn't been off hugely, so there just hasn't been much attack surface there, much attention there. But I do, from what I've heard about them, they are locked down more tightly. You can't turn off their controls, so you can't undermine yourself. And so that seems like a good recommendation from what I know.
So I'd like to hear from, if you don't mind me taking over your job, Augustine, what Augustine and Brian have to say. Like, what should I get my mom?
I'm actually, this is a tough question, right? I'm in agreement with you. I like the idea of the Chromebooks, or, I find some of the mobile devices, and Chromebooks basically like a big mobile device in a lot of ways, where it's separately controlled. It's controlled, you're passing that security buck to somebody else. You're passing that to somebody to kind of maintain and take care of to some extent. For family members, what I've kind of done is you end up being their IT support in a way, right? So you're the one kind of maintaining all that and training them on what to do and what not to do. And that's kind of been where I think I end up getting stuck with some of this. But I have, if their internet is able to handle it, and even though Chromebooks can run without internet, I'm kind of in agreement with you, something that's entirely managed off. Even for companies that have asked me like, hey, I want a website, how do I put a website? The last thing I recommend is like, oh, fire up your own server and host it yourself. And, because that just seemed, push, I think it's again, back to that cloud mentality of push that responsibility to somebody else if they can do it better than you. And unfortunately, the reality is I think most cloud providers do it and can do it better, Chromebook being included. So I'd probably be in agreement with you, or some type of mobile device, a tablet or something like that. Same thing from a reputable company that is maintaining security patches. So far, Apple has been slightly better in that regard, and stick to them as far as like longevity of their products and maintaining patches for their products, so that would probably be some recommendations I'd make. Brian?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, anything that you can remote manage will make your life a lot easier. And I know Google's got some good tools. Within the company, a lot of people have gone the iPad route because FaceTime is a good option for keeping in touch with folks. So
great. Yeah, and the questions are coming in now, so we'll try to get through some of these quickly. It's kind of related to Lauren's question about settings for Windows Defender. Is there somewhere you would send somebody to get the recommended ones? And like you said full fanged. Is there somewhere, a resource where you can find that?
How they come. Leave all the boxes checked. I don't have anything off the top of my head as far as where to go to see those settings. But if you haven't changed them, then they should be fine.
Yeah, it's usually out of the box. I agree. Usually out of the box, you're in pretty good shape. A couple Google searches on how do I set up Windows Defender to be the most secure will probably get you some really good resources as well. All right, so we got a good question here. I'm in the network engineering world, RF and fiber transmission. I do a lot of boots on the ground, in-person, physical networking work that I feel have a pretty robust understanding of some of the esoteric parts of security, like social engineering and simple security risks. So sounds like a installer or something like that who does a lot of work on the ground. So what is a way might I be able to take this decade of experience on that side of the fence and take it over into the cybersecurity world? What would be some of your steps recommending to this person that does this kind of work to step into that field? Lauren, will you go unmuted first? I'll let you go first.
Sure. I like to recommend podcasts and current events. Risky Business is one podcast I listen to. There are a lot of them. Just to start getting a feel for what's going on in the security world and how things are being compromised. It's really about starting to think in terms of this arms race, this big game that's being played on a massive scale. And then reading current events from various security blogs. I read a lot of malware blogs. And keeping up with what's happening in the field. So when you go into an interview, one of the questions we love to ask, and I know a lot of places like to ask is tell me about something security related you read recently. Tell me about something that shows me you're interested in this and are keeping up with this. You have a good arsenal of things to fall back on. And also all those things you learn from these podcasts and these articles and stuff will help you in other parts of that technical interview inevitably. And then certs are also another good place to go once you already have that foundation that it sounds like you have. So CISSP or Security Plus.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good way to start to get in, to start, enjoy it and start learning how it works. But nobody expects you to come in already an expert, because that's impossible. This industry changes too fast. You're constantly learning. So, getting a base cert line and start just so you can get the interview to get the job, and then you start kind of building your career from that point forward. All right, let's see what else we got here. So in the spirit of ScienceFest, how can we get the next generation into cybersecurity? So I think they're talking about, some of the younger people. And we did cover that a little bit already. Now, how to get into the field if they're already interested, but let's switch it a little bit. How do you get people interested? We have teenagers giving their privacy data away, just, talking about everything on Facebook. They're a lot of more vulnerable, getting hacked, using bad passwords, or maybe they're just interested in technology. How do we encourage them to get into cybersecurity? What are some ideas? Neale, go for it.
Yeah. Just completely right. When I started out in this, there were no rules. Like in high school, we had 3 computers and they were in the typewriting lab. And so it was just complete chaos there. Nobody knew what to do with them except for a couple of like 9th graders that just started playing around with them. And then we learned. And that's how I got into it. I feel like now there's a lot of, there are more rules and regulations, and everybody has to sign a responsible computer user thing. And it's really kind of, it can put a damper on the sorts of inquisitiveness that you need in order to be good in this particular field. So my recommendation would be, if there's somebody who's interested like breaking things or like testing the rules or something like that, try to find a way for that person to express that in a non-destructive way, right? So there's all kinds of, like, you could give them an old computer with an old operating system on it, and because it's theirs, they can try to break into it, and that's a safe thing to do. It's like trying to pick your own locks. That there's no law being broken. You're not messing with anybody's property there. So my perspective is just look for people who are sort of maybe on the destructive side almost, or just sort of interested in like testing things and not just accepting that this is how things are and this is how we're going to have to do it, and find a way for them to mess around with that in a way that's not going to get them in trouble.
Yeah, or on the flip side, building stuff, right, instead of breaking it. If you want to go down that road, and that's where I got my start, was building my own gaming rigs. But there's plenty of really cheap options if you're interested in building stuff. Pies are pretty reasonable and they can do a lot of fun things.
The field is so big that sometimes just like figuring out what corner to poke your toe into can be hard. And there are some CTFs that are geared towards high school students. And so that will give them questions that they can then start Googling to try to figure answers out to, and kind of give them direction as far as like getting their toe poked into different areas and trying different things in different parts of the field. I love CTFs for college kids and high schoolers.
Yeah, I think, it's learning both sides as well. And maybe, like I said, like, it's because as a defender, you need to know attack. As an attacker, you need to know defense as well, right? So on both sides, it's a relationship and an arms race all the time. But yeah, trying to find ways, I agree, to do things in non-destructive ways, or non-illegal ways, especially, to where you can encourage that inquisitive thought and that inquisitive mind, and to kind of look at things maybe sideways instead of looking at things straight on all the time. Another thing about this field is dedication and focus. So part of it too is like, I guess, maybe trying to encourage people to do things that require a lot of focus. I mean, there's some of these things we do that take days to complete, and you may not even complete it. And there's a lot of failure, right? Of trying and failing. So there's a lot of that, I think, as well, that we need to consider as part of this industry and as part of building people to excel in this industry.
And persistence. There's an atrocious attrition rate in computer science, especially for women. And some studies have tied that to the fact that you often fail at first, a lot. A lot of very good computer scientists have failed one of their first few programming classes. There are statistics on that. And that's kind of how the field works. You try, you fail, you try a different way, you fail, and you do that for a few days, and then you eventually get in. And there are malware samples that I can demo and walk someone through in an hour that took me a month to figure out, right? And that's just how this field works. And if you don't know that going into it, it can be very discouraging. So we need to make sure that that message is getting out.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. So the last question we have here is, a couple of years ago, there was a scandal with Kaspersky Labs being tied to the Russian government. So we're getting kind of political again, maybe not. How has that affected the broader perceptions of the security industry, and I guess how's that affected the broader perception of the security industry, and how's it affected the way we look at that with some of these ties?
So we're getting into politics again.
Let's tread lightly on that side.
I think that's the answer, right? I think so it's just another aspect of this field that used to be 100% technical and now has become politicized. As computers have become a bigger and bigger part of society, they've permeated in all aspects of society, including, espionage and politics. So I don't feel like that particular Kaspersky, I mean, like, Telegram was also developed in Russia, right? And people have opinions about, like, are the Russians sort of co-opting this for espionage, or like TikTok too, right? The same thing, right? Like, it's the Chinese. This is currently going on right now. Are the Chinese using this to spy on people? These are political and social questions that are things that I think people in our field haven't really had to grapple with before, but people in other fields, such as political science, have a lot better opinions on than us. That's my perspective. Other people might.
I think our field has been grappling with this for a while, and I've only been in it for 5 years. We've at least been grappling with it for as long as I've been in it. But we are very conscious of where our security tools come from. Something you should ask yourself, even when you're putting things in your personal computer, because by the way, people are attacking individuals to get to corporations. It is a thing. And is in the country of origin of this product, is there true separation between private business and state? Are there laws in this country that require private business to put encryption holes in their products? Like, is that a legal requirement for these software that I'm putting on my computer? Because in a lot of places it is. So there are some simple things that you can look up the law, you can look up the regulation and know, maybe I don't want this on my computer. There's also, I just have to throw this out there, there's a joke in the field about how many different firewalls do you need to be truly protected from how many different countries. And generally the answer is 3, and there's a specific combination of them. But we are very well aware of the fact that when you buy any product from even this country, you may be buying undocumented features. It's part of the game.
Undocumented features.
That's a good point. It was kind of disingenuous of me to claim that this is not really our problem, because even back in the 80s, we were pretty well entwined with legal stuff from the cryptography standpoint, at least. But yeah, you have to bear in mind that the software is made by people, and the people may have more agendas than just solving that problem.
It is a problem that has existed but has become more politicized recently. I definitely agree with that. So yeah,
well,
I
in our case,
would not run.
Oh, sorry. The other thing I was going to add was, in our case, understanding the needs of our customers oftentimes dictates or puts boundaries on the tools that we can and cannot use. So we have a Latvian piece of software that we've been testing with, and that's not going to work for some of our customers. So we may have to look elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, I think it's just changed. It's been a problem for a long time. We've always been aware of where things are coming from. And yeah, you've got people, you've got agendas, it's people that write the software. So, but it is getting into the political realm, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out over time. All right. Well, I think we're at our time. So I think that wraps up our discussion for this. Thank you, everyone who came. So somebody asked for emails for some of us. I would direct that to Los Alamos ScienceFest and to, I think there's contact information around somewhere that that can be sent to, and then we'll get you more information on follow-up or any type of information. Like if you want emails or to contact any of us, you're welcome to do that. We're always open to discussion, and we're glad that we're able to have this discussion and share some of our knowledge with you. We hope you all found it very useful. Yeah, so in the chat, she just put in an address you can contact Lauren at to get information to us. And this is Lauren McBride, one of the people involved with Los Alamos ScienceFest. So that's all great. So yeah, thank you all so very much. Thank you all for the great questions and listening to us. I want to thank all of our panelists for being involved. This was a great discussion. I learned a lot. I think it was excellent. And then we also, of course, thank Los Alamos ScienceFest for putting all this together. It's been great, and Lauren McBride for hosting and getting us all together and putting all this together. So thank you all so very much. The recordings of this will be available later, again, through Los Alamos ScienceFest. So keep in mind, just so some people asked about that. So yeah, recordings will be published to this if you want to view it again or to share with other people for our discussion. So thank you all so very much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.